Maybe it seems like a deep dark night, but follow me outside into the moonlight. Moonlight. Good evening, I'm John Baylor. Welcome to Moonlight, a Wild Rose Moon production. This is brought to you by Gibson Insurance and the Gibson Foundation, the Marshall County Community Foundation, and Marshall County Tourism. So we want to say a big thank you to all those who helped to make this possible. Our guest tonight is a woman who's very involved in the arts on the local level. Pam Gunterman has been a part of many theater productions at the South Bend Civic Theater, the Mishawaka Civic Theater once upon a time. She's done choreography for Bremen High School, so very involved in theater, sings at church, and she's here tonight with some poetry for us. So you got your hand in just about everything there is, don't you?
A jack of all trades and master of none.
I know how you feel. We'll be tonight and in our next several meetings. We're going to be going through some poems of Pam's that are part of a larger collection called Seasons of the Heart. And we'll talk a little bit about the collection, but I think I want to dive into the poetry as quickly as possible. If you'd like to say any words before you get started, then you're welcome to. But we've got a poem here. This is the title piece. This will be called Seasons of the Heart. So take it away, Pam.
Seasons of the Heart. The seasons of the heart are as the seasons of the year. Winter symbolizes the cold and lonely times in our lives when we seek comfort from those from whom we draw our strength, and those whose wisdom shapes and reshapes our lives. Spring is a time of new beginnings, a time to learn, to grow, to take steps, to be more. Our immaturity and vulnerability leave us open to the outside forces which feed us and allow us to blossom. Summer embodies the wild and reckless moments in our lives when we drive too fast, love too easily, and live our lives on the edge. Autumn is a season of rich color and intense emotion that provides us with unforgettable memories to savor each time we pass through it. We linger longer in some seasons than others and revisit them at inconsistent intervals throughout our lives. But the seasons of our hearts make us who we are.
Thank you. I think a lot of imagery or a lot of metaphor that comes from the changing of seasons ties it to different stages in our life. But in your poem, Seasons of the Heart, this is something that we're cycling back through continually throughout our lives. And the last, I'm just going to read these off of my phone. I want to touch on the last section again. Let's see. We may linger longer in some seasons than others, and revisit them at inconsistent intervals throughout our lives. But the seasons of our hearts make us who we are. In that, I'm just going to bounce an interpretation off and just let you run with it. But it sounds like what makes us who we are, in a sense, is that we're always changing, or that we're always going from one season into the other. And I don't know if that's exactly what you intend with the line, but like I say, I'll just bounce that off of you and let you run with it.
It's what I had in mind when I wrote it. The picture in my mind, a lot of the things I write with poetry have to do with the senses. So the picture in my mind when I read this, when I reread it, when I revisit this poem, is the picture of a tree. And there was a tree in my backyard that if I could have it divided in 4 sections and see each of the seasons in it, that tree is kind of like your life. It repeats over and over again. You see the spring, the buds start to come, and in the winter you see it bare but still alive. And then you see it majestically in the fall with the color of the leaves. So I think that's our life. That's how we are. We have happy times that are like that vibrant autumn. We have times where we're kind of barren, like that winter tree. But we come back and circle around and we bud and we are spring again and we blossom. And that's what inspired me to make this collection of poetry.
Since you're, as I mentioned before we got started, involved in several different art forms, this kind of raises a question in my mind. Do you think you're a person who thrives on changes?
I would say at times I am, and at times, like every human being, change scares the heck out of me. But change is exciting. It gives you a chance to do something you haven't done before, be someone you haven't been before. It's just wonderful. It's great to be able to change.
Yeah, I asked that question partly for personal reasons, just because I see myself as that. I like to think of myself as somebody that, could just settle down and do something, but as soon as I try, I got to get out there and do something else. And right now, I'm going through a lot of changes in my life, COVID-19 related changes, and losing my job and picking up something else, and I just like can't escape this idea that this is not what I want to be doing, but it's good for me, and this will be, if I don't have a heart attack because of all the stress, then this will be a very positive time in my life, and maybe that's more characteristic of the artist, or just in the person who tries a lot of different things than it is the average person. But I thought maybe there was a little bit of that in there that comes through in this poem for you.
Definitely.
I want to step back, and you did mention some of those themes that come into the broader collection, Seasons of the Heart. What are some of the big picture ideas or feelings or perspective that you wanted to capture in this collection?
I wanted to focus on how, with each season, you can drill down and see how it relates to your everyday life. As I mentioned in Seasons of the Heart, the poem, I talked about how summer brings out kind of our crazy side. So the poems associated with summer are more wild and crazy and take a little bit of a chance with life, when the times in my life when I've taken chances. The spring is a more respective group of poetry. Things I've done, things I haven't done, things I regret, things I'm happy I had the chance to do. Autumn is where it's my favorite season. Autumn was the first poem that was written for this collection, and all those poems talk about much more deep feelings about life in general and relationships. And then winter is focused on family. All the poems in the winter section talk about my family, my life growing up. And so it kind of cycles around, and it helped me drill down and put those things in perspective.
I'm interested also in the artist or the author, and how this comes together. When and where did the idea come from? I say when because a collection like this, maybe it's something that took a couple months, maybe it's something that developed over a couple decades. It could be either end of that spectrum. So I'm interested in that time frame. I guess I'll just start with that. I've got another follow-up question, but
as far as the time frame, this is a collection of poetry that was written over decades, not a decade. And many of the poems never started out as a collection. The Seasons of the Heart came to me, the idea of that poem, and then the rest of it kind of fell into place. I will tell you that the whole fascination with the seasons is going to maybe surprise you where it came from. When I was growing up, there was a song called It Was a Very Good Year. It was recorded by Frank Sinatra, probably in the early 60s. And there's a line near the end of that song about the days getting short as I am in the autumn of my life. And for some reason, that phrase has stuck with me for years. And so that began my fascination with the seasons and how those seasons are our lives. They're not just seasons to live through, they are fabric that becomes part of our life. I never sit down to write a poem. It comes to me. There is only one poem in this entire collection, and there are 29 of them, 29 poems in this collection, that I sat down to write. The rest of them just came to me. All the rest of them are inspired, and I never know when that's going to hit. And I would suspect that's probably true of most people that are artistic. Something just comes to you, and that's the way this worked.
When did it come to you that you want to do a collection of Seasons of the Heart? Because you mentioned that some of these poems you wrote before you had that idea.
Probably that was about 15 years ago. So Seasons of the Heart, that specific poem was written about 15 years ago. The most recent of the poems in this collection were written within the last 5 years.
And have you, what kind of publication have you done? I mean, do you have this in a book? Have you performed these poems anywhere?
I have performed several of these poems actually here at the Wild Rose Moon in a production entitled Layers last fall. The poem I just read, Seasons of the Heart, and then there is a poem for each season, and each of those was featured in that production. I don't have any of it published. Not been that lucky so far.
Oh, I wasn't looking for the publication deal, but just the question of now that you've got them together, what do you do with them?
I would love to even if I did it myself, print a book that would have on the cover that tree that I spoke about earlier, and then a collection to share with friends and family. Because it means something to me and would mean something to them, and hopefully at some point inspire with these words some other people.
This will be, I guess, a question that goes back to theme and idea, but when you think of your poetry that you've written, or these poems in particular, and then you talk about inspiring other people, what fire are you trying to light in others?
I'm a fairly ordinary person. I mean, if you met me walking down the street, you wouldn't say, oh, there's someone who's artistic. While with some people that's obvious when you see them, I'm not that person. I would hope to inspire people who feel that urge to write or to sing, to compose, to say, well, if she can do it, I could do it too. And I guess that's the inspiration I'm trying to evoke in people.
Okay, thank you. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. We've got several other poems from the collection that we'll get around to in our upcoming episodes.
If I could interject for a minute.
Yes, absolutely.
I got a question from a viewer, Mr. Jim Yoakum. He wants to know what maybe some of your early influences might have been.
I am the oldest of 10 children, and reading and poetry was my escape. You don't have a lot of quiet. So that's what got me started on the road.
Reading anything in particular?
When I was younger, I was very much into adventure novels. I had a real interest in archaeology, so I read a lot of things that had that theme to them. At one time, I thought I wanted to be an archaeologist, and then it just kind of flittered away as we all realized during our lives. We start out one place and often end up miles away from that.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Pam. We've got plenty more down the pike, several more poems, 7 more poems that we're going to feature from this collection here. But we'll wrap it up with that for tonight. Thank you also to Gibson Insurance and the Gibson Foundation, to the Marshall County Community Foundation and Marshall County Tourism for making this program possible. And thank you, Ryan Muir, for everything that you're doing off the camera. I'm John Baylor, and this is Moonlight.